Welcome to Finding Myself Through Obesity podcast. We are on episode 6. We are going to be diving into another emotional weight issue. And today we're going to be talking about me being honest with myself, me taking responsibility for my life, and then also learning how to step into my power. So the first issue is being honest. Now, as I was a young girl, I always wanted to be a good girl and I always wanted to do the right thing, but I made some interesting choices when it came to being honest. And I remember stealing money from my older sister so that I could get candy at the store when I would go to the bus stop. And I also remember stealing candy from that store a couple of times, just little things. And even as I was an adult, I would take something small and not pay for it, and I still don't know why. It wasn't until years later that I was going through a 12-step program with my church that I started to write down all these things and realize how dishonest I was being. As I'm uncovering all of these things in my journey, I'm really realizing how dishonest I've been with myself, with my husband, in a lot of ways. And what I realized is that as long as I wasn't getting caught, I didn't have much of a conscience about it. And this just goes along with the fact that I am trying to get all of the validation from outside of me and not going from within me. And as I went through that 12-step program, I remember talking to my husband about this issue that I'm having, and I didn't understand why it was so hard for me to be honest or why I was tempted to take something without paying for it. This is something that I don't even know if I want to say on this podcast because it's something that I'm not proud of. But maybe there's something that I need to learn from this. Right now, I'm not having that problem with being honest, but it is something that I have struggled with in the past. And I thought it would be important for me to bring that out there so that maybe somebody who is listening also has that issue. And I think that as I was lying to myself and I was lying to everyone else, trying to be what they wanted me to be in order to get their love and approval, maybe that disconnection from myself made it so that it made me feel alive for a minute. Maybe the risk of it, I don't know, was an exciting thing. I'm not really sure. But it is something that I felt strongly that I needed to, confess here as I am uncovering all of these things that I've been hiding for so long. Well, the second thing is taking responsibility for my life. I don't know if I've shared this experience on my podcast yet, but 2 months ago, I had my mentor ask a group of ladies to take a deep breath in and out and ask ourselves this question. And while you guys are listening to me, I want you to think about this for yourself. If you were to close your eyes and take a deep breath and say these words, I belong to myself. How do you feel? What feelings come up? Does it feel freeing or does it feel dissonant? Does it feel like not right? Do you feel a little cringy? And if you feel freeing, that's great. Belonging to you means that you get to create whatever future you want to create. So that is a good thing. But if you are like me and you had dissonance and you had a resistance and you didn't want to accept and you didn't like how you felt when you said those words, that means there is something else that you need to uncover underneath. I was telling my mentor, Angel, that I didn't want to belong to myself because I didn't want to be responsible for this big body. I didn't want to be responsible for the fact that I let myself get 300 pounds. I didn't want to be responsible for the fact that I wasn't in a financial position that I wanted to be in or that my marriage was the way it was. And I wanted to be a victim because if I was a victim, then my life would align with the good girl that I always thought that I had to be in order to get acceptance. As you say to yourself these words, I belong to myself, what feelings come up for you? For me, I didn't want to feel it. And this goes along with me not wanting to take responsibility for my life. Because if I say that I belong to me, then all of this is my fault. All of the choices that I made all of the weight that I have, the situation that I'm in, the marriage that I'm in, the relationships I have, they are all my fault. And if that was the case, then I wouldn't be able to belong into the thought that I was this good girl and that I never make mistakes. And one of the biggest issues for me is that I didn't want to make mistakes. I wanted to be a perfect child. I wanted to always do the right thing. So me being in a body like this and me taking responsibility for this body didn't align with this idea of who I wanted to be. I said this in a previous podcast, but before I got married, my parents didn't want me to marry my husband. And my dad warned me that there were 3 things that we were going to struggle with if I chose to marry my husband. And of course, me being 18, I went straight to my boyfriend at the time and said, hey, my dad's saying this and this and this. Is this true? And he was only 19 years old, 18 or 19. Of course, he's going to say, no, I will never be that. Like, he didn't think he would end up struggling with the things that my dad said he would struggle with. And so I went back to my dad and I said, Dad, I know you're concerned about me, but I know this isn't going to happen. I know that Jason isn't going to be that. He's promised me that he is not going to struggle with those things. And so it's like the first time in my life that I went against my dad's advice. I always wanted to do everything my dad told me to do. And this was the first time that I was following my own path. And so going back into me being responsible for my own life, as my husband and I went through our marriage, he struggled with all those things that my dad said he would. I think that what was happening is I wanted to fix my husband so he could be in line with that perfection that I promised my dad that I would be. So most of my marriage, I have been trying to fix Jason so that he can be in line with what I promised my dad he would be. So then I was the victim, and as long as he was the one to blame, then I wouldn't have to take responsibility for myself. So going back to saying to myself, I belong to me. I realized in that moment that I was holding on to an idea of perfection, an idea of this good girl who never makes any mistakes, this little girl who felt this belonging from her mom and dad, and I felt like it was conditional, that I had to be the good girl for them to love me. And once I was able to come full circle and realize that that was not true, realize that my parents love me no matter what I do, realize that life is meant to be experienced and life is not meant for perfection. After 43 years, I realized that I was thinking that I couldn't make a mistake in order to have that belonging with my mom and dad. But the point is I don't need that belonging with my mom and dad. I'm lucky that I have it, but I don't need it. I need the belonging with myself. And because of my codependency, because I always wanted to get belonging from outside of me, I never learned how to do that for myself until now. This is why the work that I'm doing is so amazing, because I'm finally in a place where I'm honest with myself. And when I'm honest with myself, I'm able to take responsibility for my life. And when I'm taking responsibility for my life, then I can create the life that I really want, instead of waiting for it to fall into place for me and have everyone else fix it for me. As a little girl, I was really good at manipulating the situation so that I got my needs met. And I never learned how to do that for myself. And I know I keep saying that, but it's really important, because I really felt like everybody else liking me, loving me, and approving of me was what would give me my value. The third thing is learning to step into my own power. As a little girl, I always wanted to take the clues from outside of me to see where I could gain acceptance. So I would notice what my dad needed and I would be that. I noticed what my friends needed and I would try to be that. I noticed what my mom needed and I tried to be that. In that situation, you can't step into your power because you're giving everybody else the power. Another reason I didn't want to step into my power is because I didn't want to make a mistake. And when we are going to step into our power and make decisions for ourselves, then we are going to be accountable for whatever happens. And again, it goes back to me wanting to be perfect and never wanting to make any mistakes. And that is just not realistic. I think it's really interesting because I wrote down these 10 things of issues that I feel like I needed to work on. And it's beautiful seeing all of this unfold and seeing me dig down into these layers and to really be able to see myself in a different light and see why I do what I do. And it just makes sense. I just want to say that being honest, taking responsibility for my life, and stepping into my own power are 3 huge steps in this journey for me to create the life that I want to create. And also for me to really be inspired by God, I have to be in line with all those things. And I feel like I am coming into my own power and I am learning to be responsible. And I have been honest with myself and with the people around me. And I'm still working on it. You know, it's not like we're going to take this journey and never make mistakes. I still have days where I will cry and I will feel scared. But the difference is that I know the vision of the future that I want to create. And when I get into fear and when I step into that fear, or I start crying or I feel shame, I can breathe through it. And I can remember that where I'm at is perfect. I am exactly where I need to be. And if there's something that is holding me up, what is God trying to teach me? What am I supposed to learn in this moment? So the last thing that I want to share is, as you're going on this journey, and if you start meditating and you start breathing and you start getting aligned with truth, if there's something that doesn't feel right, just dig a little deeper into it. See if there's something that you can uncover. When we are having emotional issues, when we're eating emotionally, when we are trying to escape from our lives, when we are sad or any kind of emotion comes up, it's like a clue that there's something more. And so I would invite all of my listeners to go through your life just being more curious, looking for the lesson, looking for where there's more that you can learn. Sometimes we think we know. And when we are in a place when we feel like, oh, I know everything, I already know all of this, that's when learning and growing stops. Always be curious and always be willing to see what else there is and be willing to get more downloads and more instructions from God. Instead of feeling like you already know what's best, maybe go back to God and say, is there anything else? What else is there that you want me to hear, or that you want me to do, or that you want me to learn? Thank you so much for all of your support. I have had a couple of really amazing reviews on this podcast, and it means so much to me. If you know somebody who is feeling lost, especially because of their body, share this with somebody, because I know that I am being called to share my journey for a reason. This is not for me. This is for me to share with other people my experience of going from feeling shame and feeling not good enough to realizing that I am everything that I was meant to be, that I am enough in this moment, even in this body. And once I come to the place that I know that I'm enough, then I can go on to the next level of growth and expansion. And I believe that that's what God wants for us. Stop thinking that you have to be somewhere and just accept where you are. And then the world will start opening up more, and you will have more to learn and more to experience and more to grow. And there's just all these different layers and levels, but it's joyful going through it. It's not painful. It's not restriction. It's not pain until I get there. It's enjoying the journey while I'm going through it. I hope all of you have the most amazing week, filled with love, truth, and standing in your own power.